Oh, where do I start?
Hello, colleagues of ArcelorMittal Liberia. I'm really happy to welcome you at the Learnings Week of 2024. It is June again, and June is the month that ArcelorMittal organizes a Learning Week to stimulate and to create the learning culture amongst the employees. This year it is around 3 corporate values as themes. One is leadership, next one health and safety, and sustainability. And the other thing that is very interesting this year is that ArcelorMittal is a big sponsor of the Olympic Games in Paris. And with that, we are taking a little twist to the Learning Week. We say, be a learning Olympian. A creative and engaging way to inspire learning and development. Now, during the week there will be various Olympic kind of games. Games like soccer, weightlifting, basketball, kickball, etc. You can sign up for those games, play those games, and those games are connected to a learning activity, to a learning experience, and also to a communication way of how do I use those learnings in my workplace. And I cannot let this opportunity pass without talking about health and safety. It's a passion of me, it is a passion of us. And as I mentioned already earlier, one of the themes is the corporate value of health and safety. So there will be lots of opportunities to learn more about safety, to learn about our life-saving golden rules and what health and safety can mean for you, what it can mean for your colleagues, what it can mean for your family and friends. Make it personal. So a lot of opportunities there to pick away. Now this week I would like to encourage you to participate and also to encourage our leaders, the supervisors, managers, to support our employees to participate. Rest me to say a happy and useful learning week for you, and keep in mind, everything that you learn, you keep it. It is something that you can keep for the rest of your life. No one will ever take it away from you. Be a learning Olympian. Thank you very much.
On this edition of The Fifth Estate,
David Waines.
he spent 3 decades helping children in Liberia.
He's there right now, Carquillas Farm.
Part Mother Teresa, part Indiana Jones.
I think David is fine with making enemies.
This is all about rule of law.
But now the missionary and vigilante for justice was in a third world jail, charged with a serious crime.
She looks at me and she says, David's being charged with statutory rape. I was like, statutory what? She's like, statutory rape.
But his supporters didn't believe it.
Judges are corrupt. The judiciary is corrupt.
This is absolute, vindictive, malicious targeting of me by my enemies in the government. This is absolutely clear-cut.
I'm Bob McEwen. This is The Fifth Estate. It is the recurring theme of Liberia's savage history. Violent death and bodies in the street. 1/10 of the population killed in brutal civil wars.
Come take these dead bodies from here!
And then the world's worst outbreak, Ebola, with thousands dead and dying. It is a country where death and desperation have long gone hand in hand. And in the capital, Monrovia, the central prison may be the most desperate place of all. In Liberia today, that's saying something. Almost 1,000 inmates are confined here, up to 8 men jammed into a single cell, awaiting trials that may never come. And among them, one Canadian, locked inside these walls with no idea when, even if, he'll ever get out.
I've been subjected to a lot of torturous, traumatizing situations.
David Waines of Vancouver has been here since November 2013, and he's paid the price. He's suffered constant contracted malaria 9 times, lost 60 pounds. From prison by phone, he told us he's seen so much more than that.
I've lost my immune system and had to witness brutal sexual attacks and rapes and savage beatings. So, yeah, I've lost a lot.
It's all the more unjust, Waines says, because of how a man renowned for his good works with the poor and sick could come to be facing such a desperate future himself, charged with a terrible crime. As you will see, it is some story.
What makes for a hero? I believe a hero is someone who commits his life to helping those less fortunate than himself. I recently went to Liberia to make a short film about someone I look up to as a hero, a Canadian named David Waines.
All right, so Sam reporting from Silver Beach.
Filmmaker Sam McLaughlin is a 29-year-old from British Columbia. He grew up in a Christian family for whom David Waines was a household name because of his exploits as an aid worker and missionary in Africa.
On our family fridge for my whole life, we've had a picture of David Waines and his family. Pray for the Waines in Liberia.
In these photos posted online, David and Audrey Waines and their 6 kids presented themselves as a big, happy family on an African adventure.
In my family and in my circles, he's a legendary character, sort of superhero missionary, because Africa is sort of this dark and mysterious land to so many of us. And as a Christian, it's very important. Missions is an important part, or supporting is an important part of your faith.
So it was that in the fall of 2013, Sam McLaughlin arrived in Monrovia at the headquarters of the Waines nonprofit NGO.
Hey, Sam! Welcome to Liberia. Now, this is the Widow's Walk. This is the Palava Hut, the gazebo up on the roof. So this is the neighborhood.
Wow.
And we've got a 360. We're the highest point in the whole neighborhood. Up on top.
McLaughlin had come to document the life and work of his childhood hero. As David Waines told him on camera, improving the lives of Liberian children is the mission of his NGO, called Equip Liberia.
We've been involved hundreds of children now in Liberia. When we arrived, they were dying like flies. Then to see them with safety from malaria, safety from dysentery, safety from malnutrition, thriving and playing and full of life. You look at all these children, hundreds and hundreds of them, in the villages we work in and the schools we work in. You see the life and you see the energy and you see the joy of these kids. And you say, in this, all we get to do in our life is save a lot of kids like this. It's enough.
That work made Waines a hero, in the rural villages where his organization brought clean water and sanitation, improving nutrition and health for thousands of poverty-stricken people.
But whenever I was, it was just this enormous wave of children who would come rushing out. David Wayne, David Wayne, David Wayne, David Wayne, David Wayne,
Their work has meant so much for the rural villages and for women and children, where I would say thousands of lives have been saved and many more thousands of lives have been bettered by the work that they've done there.
One of those impressed by that record was Charlene McGee, Liberian by birth, American educated. She joined EQIP in the summer of 2013.
It just felt very right. And it definitely was what appealed to me to work with EQIP.
I'm there to protect my wife. Okay, darling. I'll protect her.
For McGee, a big selling point was the selfless relation of Waines and his wife Audrey.
For me, it was, meeting them, meeting Dave and Audrey, where, people who had given so much of their life and their time to Liberia was something, honestly, that I found, it appealed, it was just like, wow.
But she says nothing was more impressive than EQIP's fight against child rape. And it's David.
You have every day girls so hungry, so desperate for school fees, so desperate for just soap to wash their clothes. They're exchanging blowjobs and sex with guys who are infected with all kinds of horrible diseases. They're forced to exchange these things just for the soap, for the food they need, for whatever they desperately need for that day. It's a desperate situation.
And when it comes to investigating sexual assaults and apprehending suspects, there are few resources to do it. In fact, most rural areas don't even have police cars.
This is all about rule of law. It's all about process. So perpetrators do get held accountable for their actions.
At first, EQIP Liberia made its vehicles available to the police. But then David Waines began to take a more active approach.
He's there right now.
This way, this way, this way.
To illustrate just how far he's willing to go, Waines staged this rape arrest scene for Sam McLaughlin.
He says he's got every right, but you got no rights. All right, we'll take him to the magisterial court.
It is unquestionably rough justice, and Waines helped to fight for this zero-tolerance rape law, where child rape suspects cannot get bail, and the maximum sentence is life.
It's big news, right? Because we used to get 0 convictions for the whole year, 0 convictions for murder, 0 convictions for rape, whole year, nothing out of the courts. This 1 month of September that we just passed, we got 2 convictions for rape and 1 conviction for murder.
How about you, Charlene?
Theatrics aside, the impact of EQIP's campaign has been very real. Among those prosecuted are many powerful people in these remote communities, according to Charlene McGee.
In terms of the EQIP work, EQIP have been very successful in working with law enforcement in arresting superintendents, teachers, pastors, and ensuring that they were held accountable for the work, for the crime that they're accused of.
But for some, the optics were troubling. A high-profile white missionary from abroad meddling in the Liberian justice system.
David just has a confidence about him that it's sort of, he's there doing the Lord's will. And I know that can get Christians in trouble. I think David is fine with making enemies. I think that is a trait of David that is not common to most Canadians. David is okay with making an enemy.
And David Waines' campaign to protect children wouldn't only make enemies, but put him on a dangerous path. When we return, confronting Liberia's powerful secret society.
The more I heard these stories, the more I went, These kids are terrified of something very, very real that's happening in this village. The devil bush.
Missionary David Waines from Vancouver has spent virtually his entire adult life doing aid work in one of Africa's most desperate countries, Liberia.
And you're bringing them here to take care, to get the vaccine, to get the medicine, to get the prevention and the treatment.
In 27 years, he survived civil war and tribal unrest to build a non-profit NGO, Equip Liberia, credited with saving thousands of lives.
From the country of Canada.
But while Waines was winning friends, a lot of them, increasingly in the countryside beyond the capital, Monrovia, he was also making enemies. Here, hidden from view, ancient tribal customs still rule societies, witch doctors, incredibly, it said, even ritual murder and cannibalism.
I'm tired of hearing about our daughters raped and their lives destroyed. I'm tired, Lord.
This month, here in the Ganta area, 24 cases of rape, cases of murder. I'm going to focus on one, a 1.5-year-old baby, the victim of a brutal and horrible rape and murder. All the parts removed from her body for ritualistic purpose.
Investigating under cover of darkness would lead Waines into the bush and troubling tales.
The more I heard these stories, the more I went, these kids are terrified of something very, very real that's happening in this village. The devil bush, the secret society. And they're terrified of being initiated, being forced to eat human flesh. They're terrified of the devil killing them for human sacrifice. Terrified of the heart man, the Zoe, grabbing them and making ritualistic medicine. And terrified of being property of the devil, of having to give their promise and their lifeblood to the devil.
Filmmaker Sam McLaughlin says Waines, the missionary, believed he was facing his ultimate enemy, the devil himself.
I think in Liberia, there's a potent sense of danger and almost evil that brings out something in you and makes you second guess your perspective of the spiritual. So for David, it's probably almost a rush to live in a society where the danger and evil, spiritual evil, exists.
And in the fall of 2013, David Waines' life would become very dangerous indeed. What he didn't know yet, but was about to find out, would change him forever. And it would start with a young teenage girl named Irene, who lived at the Waines compound in Monrovia.
I believe she was the niece of the maid, whose name was Monica. And she was just very soft-spoken and nice and gentle and hung out with her friends outside the walls most of the day.
But that summer, young Irene had a secret.
She's a very petite, tiny. She was in the 6th grade at the time, so young. And I asked her, I said, "Why is your uniform not buttoned?" And she just giggled.
And Charlene McGee began to suspect the girl might be pregnant. She invited Irene for a walk on the beach.
And I asked her, I said, Irene, I said, who you're better for? Something like your belly. Yes. That's the, it's like, who's the better for? And she would laugh and just would giggle. And then she said, if I say it, my baby papa would be deported. I said, what?
So if she told
she said, if I told you my baby father would be deported.
That soft-spoken teenager would later make a stunning accusation, pointing her finger at David Waines because she's a minor with concealed her identity.
The first time, he called me upstairs to sweep. I was sweeping upstairs. He climbed on top of me like a dog. The dogs do. And started playing with my breast. And I told him to stop.
And Irene claims the sexual assaults continued after that.
He kept doing it. I said no. My aunt I was living with did not know. In case the secret came out, he took me in the garage, in the kitchen, in his son's room. The first time he had me was in his wife's bedroom.
She told her story to the police, and a few days later, they arrived at the equipped compound, looking for Waines.
I walk out, and then it's like the living room area, and Dave is sort of right there, and the police are coming, and right before my eyes, they're like, "You're under arrest."
McGee says she didn't know why he was under arrest until an official with the police spoke to her.
She looks at me and she says, "Miss McGee, Dave has been charged with statutory rape." I was like, "Statutory what?" She's like, "Statutory rape."
When Sam McLaughlin got the news later that day, he turned his camera on himself.
So I'm Sam. I'm the filmmaker for this project. And today, Dave was arrested on rape charges. Statutory rape of a 15-year-old girl who lives in our compound, actually. And yeah, it's just a bit of a shock. So, not really sure what to say.
He had been a high-profile leader of Liberia's anti-rape campaign. Happy, it seemed, to throw suspects in jail and throw away the key. Now, David Waines was bearing the brunt of the tough laws that he had worked so hard to enforce.
Now, this is a non-bailable offense.
It's a non-bailable offense.
You could be behind bars.
And the
for a long
punishment
time.
is lifetime imprisonment for statutory rape in Liberia. Dave was on the forefront of that. I'm like, I know he knows the magnitude of what this means.
After the break, a desperate voice from behind the prison walls.
This is absolute, vindictive, malicious, special targeting of me by my enemies in the government. This is absolutely clear-cut.
Greetings in the strong name of the Lord Jesus Christ.
From his arrival in Liberia almost 3 decades ago, David Waines always seemed to find a state of grace, whether ministering to the sick and poor, surviving civil war, or taking on the country's powerful and corrupt. Think of him as part Mother Teresa, part Indiana Jones. Now, thanks to the tough rape law he had done so much to promote, he was behind bars, perhaps for the rest of his life.
Hi, operator. I'm trying to make a phone call to Monrovia, Liberia. Can I give you the number?
Over the past year, the Fifth Estate has spoken to David Waines in prison dozens of times on an illegal cell phone hidden from the guards. One of his few lifelines to an outside world he feared he might never see again.
Yeah, I'm very weak, I'm very frail, I'm very sick.
At times, Waines did sound philosophical.
It's a very ugly, human, messed up tragedy, but I'm hanging in there to play my part in every way to bring some good and something for the common good out of this rotten situation.
But he says he's kept track of the inmates here who've died, 42 in the past 2 years. Afraid he could be number 43.
Hi, Lynette.
Hi, David. What's happening?
Sorry, David, are you there?
Once he was so anxious, he called our associate producer Lynette Fortune 26 times in a single day.
This is absolute, vindictive, malicious, special targeting by my enemies in the government. This is absolutely clear cut.
Through it all, David Waines has been adamant the rape charges against him were blatantly trumped up by his enemies for revenge or to extort money and assets from him.
David, can you take us back to when this began for you? How did you recognize that something was going on, that something was wrong?
I knew things were wrong. I had heard rumors that people were going to falsely accuse me of, or were behind my back falsely accusing me of the pregnancy in late September, early October.
It was in November 2013 that the Liberian government laid out its case against Wayne in damning detail. It alleges he had sexual intercourse with the underage girl named Irene several times.
I'm innocent, yes, but Liberia is a crazy place. It really doesn't matter if you're innocent. Once they decide you have enemies and they decide to falsely accuse you, they don't believe in science and all that.
And there are those who agreed that given the sorry state of justice in Liberia, Waines might not stand a chance.
Judges are corrupt. The judiciary is corrupt. The president acknowledges that. Everybody says that, but nobody does anything because this is Liberia.
Henry Costa should know he's Liberia's most celebrated talk radio host, once jailed for his anti-government views. It was then, in prison, that he met and befriended David Waines.
To be kept in such a place and know that you've been kept there because your enemies have plotted and are succeeding against you. That alone, for some people, is enough to just break them down. But David is a spiritual man. He's a man of faith, and abiding faith kept him alive. All right, let's go to the phone lines and take some calls here.
Once Costa was released, he used his radio show to turn David Waines into a cause célèbre, calling on the president of Liberia to intervene in his case.
And we made it our business to talk every single day about David Waines. And we even upped the ante and said, if David died in this country, it would be a curse. It would be a shame unto us.
The campaign caught fire in Liberia and in Canada, too. There was a YouTube video by Sam McLaughlin.
David Waines has spent almost his entire life helping people who need it most. But now he needs our help. Let's make sure that Dave gets a speedy and fair trial and do our best to bring him back safely to Canada to be with his family.
Thousands signed an internet petition to the president of Liberia. One influential supporter was Conservative MP John Weston, who represents Vancouver.
I learned from several people that there was a guy they described as a Canadian hero who was in trouble in a far-off country.
With excellent contacts in Africa, John Weston got in touch with the Liberian president directly.
She had a keen eye for the relationship between Liberia and Canada, and I suspect she wanted to show, as a woman who had almost been murdered herself in the conflicts in the country, that Liberia was returning to the rule of law and that people from other countries could expect due process there.
And the campaign began to pay off. When President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf visited the Monrovia prison last spring, she spent 10 minutes talking with David Waines. Shortly after that, he was allowed to go to the hospital for badly needed medical care.
I am going crippled day by day.
I can see that, David.
I continue to lose, and my system is breaking down.
But the timing of his hospital stay could not have been worse. It was July 2014. The deadly Ebola plague was now sweeping through the city and ravaging the hospital itself.
Just drowning in patients and drowning in Ebola, and all your nurses and doctors are afraid, and you've got nurses and doctors dying as you speak, and nurses and doctors from other hospitals have already died in your unit. It's a very, very serious situation. I don't know what's going to happen.
That was when a desperate Waines sent this mass email to family and friends, ending with a single word in capital letters: help. Somehow, against all odds, the campaign to free him succeeded.
Great to be free.
Early in August, the Liberian court ordered him released on what was called medical bail. He left the prison and headed for the airport.
I'm happy to be going to get treatment for my hands. They're very, very messed, and I don't want to lose the rest of them. I've lost about 65% of the joints.
After 9 harrowing months, he was just happy to be alive.
God bless all my friends and family. God bless Canada.
When we return, the lingering questions. Irene, now a mother, tells her story. And David Waines sits down to speak with us about his.
She told them she had had sex with you on 4 occasions and that you were the father of the pregnancy at that point.
Right. And
How
she
do you
was
respond?
pressurized. She was pressurized to say that. And it's absolutely not true. I told them that repeatedly. Never had sex, never at all.
When David Waines arrived home from Africa in August 2014, it was the end of 9 long months in one of the most notorious prisons in the world.
It was horrible, horrible, horrible. No light, no candle, no flashlight.
Yeah.
Incomplete darkness. Rats running on my body. Cockroaches all over the face. Mosquitoes eating up. You know, no protection for the legs. They don't let you have pants.
When he sat down with us the next day, safely back home, he still seemed almost giddy with relief after his most unlikely escape.
Imagine, being with an almost death sentence and a prisoner, and now I'm back with my lovely, fantastic family and my wife and all the extended family. And wow, amazing.
But back in Liberia, the questions remain about whether he'll return to stand trial for statutory rape, and what, if anything, did happen between Waines and the girl named Irene. Our investigation of that took us hundreds of kilometers into northern Liberia, to a small village where Irene now lives. When we asked about David Waines, she reiterated her police statement that he sexually assaulted her several times and warned her not to tell anyone else about what happened.
He said I must not tell my father. Nobody should know. We must not tell none of my people. It must only be between he and me.
She claims throughout it all, Waines made promises to her and her family.
He told me he will build me a house, send me to college. Then he said he will carry me to Canada.
Waines categorically denies the police report that he ever sexually assaulted Irene, along with all of her other allegations.
She told them she had had sex with you on 4 occasions and that you were the father of the pregnancy at that point.
Right. And
How
she
do you
was
respond?
pressurized. She was pressurized to say that. And it's absolutely not true. I told them that repeatedly. Never had sex, never at all.
But the prosecution case does raise some other mysterious issues. At midnight, 2 days before his arrest, David Waines was driven several hours to Liberia's border with the Ivory Coast. When he and his driver returned the next day, Chief Staffer Charlene McGee spoke to the driver.
He starts to explain how they drove to the border. I'm like, for what? He's like, Dave's trying to leave the country. I was like, leave the country? I'm like, leave the country for what?
The driver told her with no visa, Waines was denied entry to the Ivory Coast. Waines insists he was not fleeing. It was just a normal business trip, albeit in the middle of the night.
I went and talked to the people at immigration because there's all kinds of things that we need, materials that we need, and so whatever. And to be perfectly frank, did I ever want to get out of Liberia? Did I ever want to get out of the hellish situation I was in? Absolutely. Absolutely, I wanted to get out.
In the prosecution case against Waines, there is also an accusation of money changing hands. Monica, Equip's caretaker and the aunt of Irene, she told the police that just before he was arrested, Waines gave her $500 in cash and offered to double her salary. Was it hush money so she would keep quiet? Waines says it never happened at all.
Yeah, I mean, absolute rubbish and nothing behind that at all. It was all a setup, and all those things were designed to make sure I was buried and destroyed. And these are not the only false accusations they made.
So there's no truth to the money at all?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so, so there's many other false accusations which are made against me to make sure that whether they catch, whether this one works or another one works, let's load up all the false accusations we can.
But this was the response of Irene's Aunt Monica when we told her David Waines had denied everything.
He never offered this money. Oh, my God. Yeah. My God. They can't tell me like that. Because Audrey was there, Roland was there. They can't tell me like that. Can't tell me like that. No.
But there are allegations which may be even more disturbing. The police report alleges that when Irene was about 5 months pregnant, Waines took her from school to a local hospital, trying to arrange an abortion. This is what Irene told us about that.
He came to my class as my sponsor. He took me to the hospital to abort the pregnancy. He told the doctors I was raped by a different person. He did not tell me he was going to take it out. I started crying in the hospital. The doctors told him, "Call her auntie, let her come. She is just a little girl." We got in the car and left.
Waines maintains the true story is that he heard Irene was talking about possibly aborting herself, and he took her to get counseling.
I told them she is desperate for an abortion, and she's talking about harming herself. And I know personally of dozens of young girls who have died doing exactly the same thing over my years in Liberia. Very common there. Very, very common.
But that is not how the hospital staff reported it, according to these police documents.
In the police statement, and these are statements filed with the court and they're public domain in Liberia, the doctor at the hospital and a midwife who was involved, both say the visit of you bringing Irene to the hospital was to procure an abortion.
That's the frame up, right? That's the twist. That's the spin. You do something to help somebody and they spin it.
For all the charges and countercharges, Irene did not get an abortion. And this is her baby, born in February 2014, a little boy now grown into a chubby toddler. David Waines insists he is not the father and that a DNA test would prove it.
Do the DNA and you'll find out it's a ridiculous charge. I had nothing to do with that pregnancy. So the premise of your arrest is ridiculous. And they refused. They laughed and they said, yeah, we don't have DNA and we won't do DNA and go and look for the real father. We won't do that. We've got you and we know you're guilty. And yeah.
But the prosecution dismissed that argument, saying whether the baby is black, white, pink, or gray, the identity of the father doesn't matter. In a statutory rape case, all that's relevant is whether an adult had sexual intercourse with an underage female. David Waines maintains not only would DNA prove he's not the father, but it would also cast doubt on the credibility of Irene's entire story, and therefore on the prosecution's case against him. In the end, a DNA test did take place in the summer of 2014. But here's the twist. The results were sealed to be revealed only if and when David Waines stands trial. So to get that DNA evidence, Waines must return to Liberia and the dreaded Monrovia prison with no bail and a possible sentence of life behind bars. But there's another twist. When the DNA test was done, a second male was tested too, a 15-year-old investigated for possibly having sex with Irene. David Waines always insisted someone else must be the father. So for those at the heart of it, the conclusion of this story remains unwritten. For Irene and her baby, there's uncertainty about the future and whether the rape trial will ever be heard. For David Waines, there are the questions about DNA and the frustration of knowing he can only get those potentially crucial results if he turns himself over to what's acknowledged to be a corrupt justice system.
There are a lot of people who they will look at a sequence of events and say, well,
of course,
where there's smoke, there must be fire.
Exactly.
So how do you respond to those people?
Well, there's tons of people, and as soon as they hear an accusation, a false accusation against anybody, they will believe what they want to believe. So there's tons of people who make up their mind based on not truth, but just whatever they want, they feel like.
And what about filmmaker Sam McLaughlin?
David Waines has spent almost his entire life helping people who need it most, and now he needs our help.
Where does this leave your film?
Yeah, so I was working on the David Waines hero story, which took a bit of a turn.
He now has a movie without an end.
I don't know that Dave's guilty. I don't think he is guilty, but it's like all of a sudden something comes up that tarnishes the story, the hero story. And how do you tell it? And I think you just have to try to tell the whole story and tell it truthfully and let the viewer decide.
So in that spirit, in this tangled tale, the final words will go to David Waines.
Who am I? I'm just Dave, and I'm just a low-level guy, and I've made lots of mistakes in my life. Who am I? I'm Dave, but I have a very, very loving family and a great community of friends. So I'm not a hero. I'm not a saint at all. But these people, man, they really came to my rescue in my hour of desperate need. And I will never forget what that means.